Hello, everybody. It's me, Shannon LaBruyere. I am live and loving it tonight. Welcome to Sunday Night Live, where we explore the principles that equip us to thrive in change. All manner of change. The change that we planned and we wanted that maybe it turned out wasn't as great as we thought, to the change that we didn't see coming, hit us like a ton of bricks, the job loss, the company closing, or the changes that we have planned for in the future that we're hoping to see come to pass. All of those changes are ways that we can grow, we can thrive, and all we need to do is apply some really, really powerful principles in order to make that happen. So I'm delighted to be here to share it with you. And welcome. If you have jumped on, hi, Tammy, I'm glad you're here. If you've jumped on live here on Facebook, I want you to say hi in the comments. Let us know you're here. If you've never been on Sunday Night Live before, I encourage you, say hi, let us know where you're watching from, and be sure to give StreamYard permission to use your name and your Facebook profile so that way we'll know who you are. Hey, Pam, I'm glad you're here. So, welcome. Hello, hello. I'm looking forward to talking to you tonight about a really, really cool coaching technique that you don't have to have a professional coach to use. So, as much as I love using this technique with my clients and we use it and it works, I also can use it on myself, and you can use it on yourself too. You can use what we're going to talk about tonight in order to move yourself off center, get yourself unstuck, and know what to do when you have no options. Awesome. Great. All right, let's see. Before we get too far in, I've got to give a shout out to Thumb Roast Coffee, which is my favorite coffee. As you know, the holidays are coming up. Thanksgiving is in just a few days here in the United States. And then, of course, Christmas, just a few weeks away. And I'm not sure how it is where you're at, but here where I'm at, there's been some talk of shortages of gifts, shortages of items that have been shipped from overseas out there in cargo containers that they can't get them into the docks. I've got a solution for you. It is Thumb Roast Coffee. If you know somebody who is a coffee drinker, a coffee lover, they are going to love locally roasted, available, delicious Thumb Roast coffee. And you can order it from anywhere in the United States and have it shipped anywhere in the United States. And even better, you get 15% off if you order it at thumbroastcoffee.com and use the coupon code THRIVE, THRIVE. You are going to be a hero. You don't have to worry about shortages. Your gift giving solutions are all at thumbroastcoffee.com. The people you care about will love it. I promise. All right, let's see. Tonight's Thrive principle is hashtag trust the process. As is so often the case when it comes to some of these techniques we explore, this is a process that's linked to how we think. It's linked to our brain and how our brain is wired, and it works. So you can trust that the process we're going to talk about tonight to get yourself unstuck, to open up your options, is something that when you use it, it is going to work. It is a process. Start at the beginning, work the whole thing. Don't give up in the middle. And when you get to the end, you are going to find that you are feeling much more free. Whew! Not nearly as constricted, more freedom, more options, more choices. Who doesn't love that, right? All right, let's go to, oh, Corey's here. Hi, Hori. All right, let's get started. So first of all, I'm going to bust a myth. I'm going to bust a myth. I'm not going to lie. The title of tonight's broadcast was a little sneaky, and it says this. The title is What to Do When You Have No Options. So the first thing I want to talk about is this, and welcome, Mary, watching live. The first thing I want to do is bust this myth. You always have options. And I just want you to let that sink in. It is important. It is part of this process to remind ourselves that we always have options. We always have options. You always have options. No matter how trapped you feel, you have options. Years ago, when I worked lifting heavy things at a mail processing plant, I worked afternoons. 11 o'clock came around. It was time for me in the evening, 11 o'clock in the evening. It was time for me to go home, and I felt sick. And so I wanted to leave. And they had assigned us overtime. And when I went up to fill out my slip to say, I need to go home because I don't feel good, my boss told me I couldn't leave. She flat out said, "You can't go. We called overtime. We need you here to do this work." And I said, "I have to go. I feel really sick and I need to go home." And she said, "You can't go." And I picked up my time card and I punched out and I went home because I wasn't a prisoner. I wasn't a prisoner. I was an employee. This is the thing. I couldn't go home without consequences. And that's the thing that we have to remember about options. We feel like we don't have options, but in reality, we don't like the consequences of the options we have. And so you're probably rolling your eyes and saying, okay, what difference does it make? Well, it makes a lot of difference. It is much different to be a prisoner that your boss won't allow to leave a building, right? Versus being an adult with the ability to choose and with the power to leave. When we tell ourselves we have no options, we essentially remove our power. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? When we tell ourselves we have no options, we have no choice, excuse me, when we tell ourselves those things, we are telling ourselves that we are powerless, and that is not true. When we tell ourselves we have options, even if the options may be between two consequences that we're not crazy about, we still have options. So I want us, when we're trying to live a resilient life that allows us to thrive and change, looking at how we can help ourselves to not be stuck, I want us to always remember we have options. We have options. We have the ability to choose. All right. So once we've decided that we have options, this is the thing. This is the thing. A lot of times, many times, in fact, I'm going to say most of the times when I am dealing with my clients, they have totally written off options before they ever considered options. I've done that myself. I have done that myself. I worked for many years in a government agency. I was there for 31 years and a few months to be exact. I worked for many years in a government agency where many, many people around me told me I couldn't leave. I couldn't leave. They told me this job is too good. They told me you'll never get these kind of benefits if you leave. They told me you'll never get this kind of sick leave. They told me there's never going to be another job that's as secure as this. And in a way, they were right. Those were all reasons that I chose to stay in my government job. I did appreciate the benefits. I did appreciate the security of it. I did appreciate the retirement benefits. They were right about reasons to stay, but they were wrong when they said I couldn't leave because I could. And as it turns out, I did. But this is the thing. They never thought of it. They never even considered leaving. They wrote that off. When they were belly aching about their boss, when they were sick and tired of being sick and tired, when they were grumbling and complaining and hating what they did, they never allowed themselves for a moment to consider that they actually could leave. And I'll tell you what happened when I realized, wait a second, I could leave. It looked like they were going to consolidate my district and eliminate my job. And my boss gave me and the rest of his staff a heads up and said, hey, this might be happening. So you might want to look for some options of jobs to get within the organization so that when they shut our district down, you're already in a spot. You're not going to be out there hanging desperate. And I had just recently been promoted into management. I was not feeling really confident that I was going to be able to get a great position. And so I decided to go outside of my agency and look at options. And I applied for a couple of jobs. I applied for a job that sounded really exciting in public relations. And when I interviewed for the job, they were really, really energizing people. They loved what I was bringing. They loved my skill set. And I'd worked in PR, so it was great. Worked in event planning, it was great. It was such a good match. And then they told me how much it paid. And I thought, okay, you know what? That's about what I make now. And then they told me that I would get, after working there a year, I would get 1 week of vacation. Well, at the time, I had 4 weeks of vacation in my current job. Like, okay. And then I didn't get any sick leave in that PR position with that firm. It's like, well, maybe I don't need that, but I got sick leave. And they didn't have any 401k, but they were thinking about getting one. And like, ooh, I have everything they were telling me. They wanted me to work there. I had a choice. I could go. But when I looked at the reasons right then why I was working and why I would be leaving, I thought, I'm not trading what I have for that. I'm good. All of a sudden, me feeling like I had no options and my job was going to be eliminated and I didn't know what to do. And maybe the world would be a better, maybe my job would be better out there. It allowed me to see what I currently had in a new light. I had a secure position. If my district dissolved, I would be able to get another secure position within that organization, and I would be able to preserve at the time what mattered most to me. This is important. Things change for us as time goes on. And sometimes we take something off the table and we forget that we can maybe take a look at that option. We forget that maybe our circumstances have changed, because at the time when I looked at what I was going to have to do to make the same money, I made a real solid choice and I felt great about it. You know what? I'm going to stay with this organization and I'm prepared to do any job they have available to me. Why? Because I had a job that allowed me flexibility. It gave me security for my future. It gave me time off to spend with my family. I got to work hours that I could adjust as needed. All of a sudden, the scary thing wasn't so scary. I realized, oh, I like it. This is good. Revisited the fact that I had a choice. I had an option. Now fast forward 20 years and I'm struggling. I'm working in an organization that doesn't appreciate my best gifts and talents. And I was always operating under the assumption that I didn't want to go anywhere. I wasn't going to go anywhere. Nothing else would be as good. Nothing else would offer me X amount of days off, X amount of retirement, X amount of fill in the blank. I didn't even consider I had a choice, and I started feeling trapped and depressed and anxious. And then I used this technique. Here it is. Write down every option, every option. If you're stuck, if you're trapped, if you feel like you have no choices, write down all of your choices, even if they stink, even if you know those are horrible choices, because Writing them down clicks something in your brain. When I wrote down what were all of my options to solve my problem of disliking the job I was doing, feeling frustrated, feeling unappreciated, doing great work for people who didn't appreciate it or care for it. When I took a look at that and started writing down all of my options, these are some of the things I came up with. I could try to volunteer to do a different job, right? Try something else new out within the organization. That was an option. I could quit. I could just walk in and say, you know what? I'm not going to be here anymore. Goodbye. Talk about going nuclear, right? So I could just quit. I had a list of things that went all the way from quitting immediately to gutting it out, putting in my time, and just suffering until it was time to leave. And I took a look at all those options, those choices, even the crazy ones. You guys, I wasn't going to walk in and quit, but it was okay. I had written it down and it actually was an option, but it was an option that I could look at and say, I don't think I'm going to do that. That costs too much. That's not a viable option for me. And then I looked at the other end of the spectrum and I realized that I was suffering in many ways. My quality of life was suffering. My emotional life was suffering. I was feeling more and more depressed and frustrated because I wasn't able to use my gifts and talents anymore in my job. So the other end of the scale, just hanging on by my fingernails, that wasn't going to work either. And I decided, you know what? That's an option I'm going to get rid of. Let's take a look at what else we've got here. And there are many ways to leave an organization. One of them is to quit. One of them is to get fired, right? One of them is to retire. And I started thinking about that. What if I plan to retire at my earliest retirement date? What if I didn't tell myself I had to stay here to get my maximum pension? What if I gave myself permission to leave and get less pension? What would that look like? And wheels started to turn. What are you looking at in your life that you're saying, there are no good options? I'm just stuck here. I want you to write down crazy options, crazy things you'd never think of doing. Because by writing those down or sharing those with somebody like a coach, when you share those crazy ideas, this is the thing. Options are not commitments. It's okay to consider the crazy option, the extreme option, the option that you don't think in a million years you'd take, because you know what? It might sort of trigger another good idea that leads to another good idea that you say, I'm not going to get fired and I'm not going to quit, but I could retire. What does that look like? And all of a sudden, instead of feeling stuck and trapped and depressed, I was excited and energized, and I had a mission. I had a plan. Don't just tell yourself no, no, no all the time because of a decision you made 10 years ago. Things are different now. Take a look and see. When you feel stuck, when you have no choices, write down the craziest stuff you can think of. That thing you'd love to do, that you think that it's the most amazing thing in the world, but you can't. How about write down that you can and then put all the ways you could do it, even if they're crazy, even if it means you'd need $1 million. Maybe you have $1 million. I don't know. I'm here to tell you that you always have options, and an easy self-coaching technique to explore them is to put every option you can think of on the table, even the ones you don't like. Get them out there. Get those creative juices flowing. All right. Hi, Sammy. I'm glad you're here. All right. So Corey says this. She said, I had a boss once that was happy with my work, but knew I wasn't happy in the role and company, and he encouraged me to look for something else. His statement was that people feel better when they know they have options. He's right. Corey, how did that make you feel? How did that make you feel to be seen and then be told you're not stuck here, especially from somebody who was happy with what you were doing? What a generous gift he gave you, by the way. What was that like? What was that like? What have you told yourself you can't do without even really considering ways? You just take it off the table. I used to do a lot of shopping. I don't shop a whole lot anymore, but I used to do a lot of shopping at resale shops, thrift stores, and I would also go to the high-end department stores. So I was not choosy. If I found something I liked at the Goodwill or the Salvation Army or St. Vincent de Paul store, which was what was by me out by where I lived, I was fine getting something there. But I had no problem going into a high-end store and checking out what they had. Maybe, just maybe, I'd catch something on sale. Maybe, just maybe, I'd see something that was worth saving up for. I allowed myself to start, and there's a story behind allowing myself to do that. I allowed myself to start going in and looking, even if I thought I couldn't afford it. One of my favorite stories about Christmas was when my sister and I went shopping together at the mall. We were young and the mall was just brand new. So we were probably, I'm going to say I was 12 or maybe I was 13 and she was 12. And here we are, we have a couple of hours to kill at the mall. And there was a jewelry store with a watch in a beautiful box in the window. There weren't a whole lot of people in the mall at the time, and I was really looking at that watch, and the sales lady came out, and she said, "Hey, would you like to try on that watch?" What? What? I told her, I can't afford that watch. She said, "Oh, that's okay." She goes, "Let's just see how it looks. Let's see how it looks on your arm." So I go, "Okay." So we went in and I was just giggly, it was so fun. And she tried this watch on me and I admired it for the longest time. And I remember that it was $50 and there was no way I had $50 for this beautiful watch. So, I thanked her and I, gave it back, kind of sad, but it had been fun to try it on. And we went home. My mom picked us up, went home, and I told her all about, Mom, we were at this jewelry store and I was looking at this watch and this lady, she let me try it on and it was really beautiful and it was $50. And oh my gosh, it was amazing. And it was just so much fun. And I couldn't believe she let me try it on and on and on I went. The next day while I was at school, my mom went up to the mall. Yeah. And she went to that jewelry store and that lady remembered me. And she asked her, "What's the watch?" And the lady showed her. My mom bought it. And she gave me that watch for Christmas. And when I opened that watch, I was blown away. I was blown away. I can't tell you how hard it was for me to say yes to trying on that watch. I felt ridiculous. I felt underdressed. I was a kid, right? I mean, this was a fancy jewelry store. I was a kid. I was underdressed. I felt embarrassed that I didn't have money. I felt awkward. I'd never been in a store like that. I felt a little bit seen by a salesperson who came out and kind of corralled me and asked me to try it. But in the end, I had more options than I thought. I had more choices than I thought. The choice to just look and try, even if I'm not making a commitment to do it, just to try it, that choice opened up a beautiful gift, a surprise that I could have never seen coming. Our lives are like that. Your life is like that. When you take the options off the table, when you never go in and look just to see what it's like, what does it feel like? What does it feel like to be in that office building that you've been dreaming about getting a job in? What does it feel like to wear those shoes? What does it feel like? Fill in the blank. Options are not commitments. When we give ourselves permission to explore even the crazy things, unbelievable options begin to open up for us. Things we would have never seen before just by trying. Mary says this, that was a smart sales lady. Wasn't she though? Wasn't she though? My sister and I had some money in our pocket. We had gone to a lot of stores and people had looked at us and thought we were kids and didn't give us the time of day. And here was a lady who had nothing to lose. She explored her options as well. She was selling nothing. Or she could spend a half hour exploring what a pretty watch looked like on a teenage girl who was smitten by it. And her options paid off too. You have more choices than you think. You have more options than you think. The self-coaching technique that I am encouraging you to use is this. Write down all the options that you can think of, even if they're crazy, even if you've never do them. And then look at them for what they're worth. It's okay to cross it off. But every time you cross off an option, every time you cross off one of those extreme options, after you've given it consideration, your sense of power begins to build. Your sense of power and self-empowerment begins to build. You always have options, and options are not commitments. Don't take things off the table. Don't say, I'm not going to try that on. I'll never get that. You just might get it. You don't know. I'll never apply for that job. I'd never qualify. Really? Does it sound like something you'd love to do? Is it something you know that you'd be good at? Put it out there. Who knows where it'll go? You've got more options than you think, but you're taking half of them off the table before you've even considered them. Get them all out there. The crazy ones, the extreme ones. I could misbehave and get fired. Yep, that's one way to leave a job, right? I could never leave. I could stay here until I'm 85, like some of the people I know. That's not an option either. But somewhere in the middle there, I found something that unlocked my self-imposed prison. And I was able to get enough freedom to say, okay, hold on a second. I've got some choices. I could choose to leave at my earliest retirement date from my job. I could choose to leave. I could choose to build a business over the next 5 years until that day comes, which is exactly what I did. When I looked at the options, it looked like I had two. I can either quit or I can stay forever. But in reality, my circumstances had changed from the last time I'd considered this issue. I had more options than I thought. Asking the questions doesn't mean you have to do it. Asking the questions doesn't mean you have to do it. Exploring your options is not the same as a commitment. It doesn't make you a bad person. Doesn't make you disloyal to your employer to explore your options. What it does is it unlocks that feeling of being stuck and reminds us that we have power. And it also, as part of the process, unlocks our creativity. As we start getting more and more outlandish, what could we do? How could we do it? What are some crazy things? There are seeds of greatness in some of our craziest ideas. It was crazy to think that I would leave my career and start a brand new one as an entrepreneur. That was crazy. And here I am. Here I am. I don't feel crazy. I feel delighted and exhilarated and empowered and passionate. We have options. You have options. Don't take them off the table before you've considered them. Anybody have something you want to share? Is there an area where you feel like you're stuck and need to look at your options? Put it out there. Make a list. Make a list. You have more options than you think. at the end, you might be just like I was 20 some years ago when I looked at my options to leave my organization and decided, you know what? The reasons I work and are good enough to stay here. I'm sticking it out. You might decide to stand pat, but you'll feel better about it because you'll have looked at your opportunities. My coaching friend, Michelle Burkhardt, always says this great phrase, and I love it, about how we so often just rearrange the pillows in our prison cell. The door is wide open. We have options. You don't have to feel like you're going to get trapped if you consider them. You can still say no. You can still decide to keep what you've got. Nothing says you have to throw it all away. But you're going to feel so much better when you get all of those options out there on the table. Speak those words, write it out, make that list. What are your options? And then you can choose based on the consequences that go along with them. If you never look, you'll never know. All right, with that, I want you all to have a wonderful, grateful week as we lead up to U.S. Thanksgiving. It's this Thursday. I think it's the 26th, maybe. I might have the date wrong, but we're coming up on a time of gratitude and celebration. I want you to know that you have choices with that too. You can choose to go. You're not a prisoner, and nobody can make you. You can choose to go to that family function. You can choose to stay home. You can choose to make turkey. You can choose to make ham. You can choose to have 2 pieces of pie. You can choose to have none. You've got a lot of choices in front of you. Embrace them, consider them, and then make the one that makes sense. Just because you consider eating 3 pieces of pie doesn't mean you're going to. Although I'm not going to lie. I think I'm going to. Not all at once. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. With that, I wish you all the best. God bless you. I love you, and I will see you soon. Bye.